This is about my experience in November with National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo. I'd been toying with some story ideas for a while, but writing a novel is a daunting task, and it's hard to get started. Having an artificial deadline helps, and NaNoWriMo sets you a goal, 50,000 words in a month. That's a short novel, but a substantial piece of writing nonetheless, and at the very least, a good starting point. It's not a competition, and no winner is anyone who meets the target. There are plenty of opportunities to join a community of writing participants through forums, meetups, Facebook and hashtags, but I preferred to concentrate on actual writing rather than discussing writing. Besides, my usual online friends offered more than enough support and distraction. One could write a novel using Word, a typewriter, or a blunt crayon, but long pieces require planning, research, and the ability to experiment with structure. Scrivener is the closest thing to an industry standard, but it's not what I used because it was Mac only at the time. Instead, I used the free tool YWriter, which is powerful despite its clunky interface. It lacks the fashionable distraction-free mode, but really, if you're distracted by a toolbar, you'd need to be in an isolation tank not to be distracted by the world. I don't fetishize the purity of the text. I need context and a wider view, and to be able to write or take notes anywhere. Awesome Note, despite its cheesy name and graphics, is easy to use and very helpful. I wish it made more use of multi-touch to rearrange in Zoom, but the best thing is that it syncs to Google Docs. That then lets me take notes across many platforms, and I also use it for project management tasks such as word count targets, and as a way to read my draft wherever I was. But it has two major problems: no tracking changes, and it won't sync with the major novel writing tools. Ideally, you'd have a powerful desktop app with versioning, tracking changes, and structural tools that syncs to the cloud, plus mobile apps that make the most of the multi-touch interfaces for viewing and editing. In the meantime, we're stuck with some very analog technologies, such as scene boards made of paper, pen, and post-its. It's cumbersome, but until we have huge multi-touch devices, it's the best we'll do. A scene board is vital in keeping track of complex narrative threads, such as my 3 narrators and nonlinear time structure. Novels can also be nonlinear in the sense that they have complex webs of themes and allusions. I map those by hand, plotting both explicit and implicit links, aiming to create a fertile ground from which readers can extract their own meanings. I also did a lot of drawing, including rough maps of my mashed-up city, site plans and sketches of my settings, structures and narrative outlines, and scoring the crescendos with quasi-musical notation. Towards the end, I needed to do a big structural edit, and I had to print it all out at 6 point and lay it across the floor in pieces to see how the narrative threads balanced. The danger was that if the draft had got much longer, I'd have needed a bigger apartment. Research is always vital, and it's no surprise the internet was a vast help there. Google Books came in particularly handy for finding the context for a half-remembered quote. After all, even if you have the book, you can't always remember the page number for the one that deals with the jeweled tortoise. Another resource that came in useful for my very peculiar purposes was symbols.com. It lets you search for signs by their graphical attributes, and the meanings include everything from alchemy and hobo symbols to meteorology and mathematics. Last and certainly not least, I actually read books and journals. Sometimes that's because I happily admit to being influenced by a lot of other writers, but it's often for more factual research. For instance, reading The World's Greatest Bordellos was much cheaper than field research. I've talked about using technology to assist with writing, but writing itself is a technology. That's not just the written word, but all writing, all language, the conventions of narrative, realist description, and the very idea of character. Like any tech, it can be advanced, tinkered with, and subverted, and the 20th century Oulipo novelists took this to an extreme. They used mathematics to find new structures and push beyond literary conventions. For instance, this shows the combinatorial narrative structure of Calvino's classic If on a Winter's Night a Traveller. Intertextuality sees all text as hypertext. Writing involves explicit, implicit, and often unconscious remixing of plots, tropes, and prose styles. Plagiarism is inevitable. As Goddard said, it's not where you take things from, it's where you take them to. Despite the romantic image of fiction writing, it's actually rather a geeky pursuit. It combines technique and creativity and involves unsociable hours, careful research and planning, and a hell of a lot of debugging. So, in just over a month, I wrote a 70,000-word novel. Well, actually, what I wrote was a first draft, and after I get feedback from my beta testers, I still have to revise, refine, and possibly publish my work. And whether it finds a readership or languishes at the bottom of my hard drive, it's been an inspiring and illuminating experience.